All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our second fire station stakeholder meeting. It's great to see such a great group here again tonight supporting this initiative. It was great to see the first stakeholder meetings. We were very pleased with the exchange of information we had that evening. After that meeting, we've worked very hard to answer several of the questions that were posed at that meeting to try to be transparent and keep everybody informed on this plan. We did post those on our websites. In response to some of the information that we exchanged during our first stakeholder meeting, we're very excited tonight to reveal two new footprints for Station 1 and 2. We have LeMay Erickson here that had took direct input from the first stakeholder meeting and made the conceptual drawings. These are just conceptual. We did not authorize them for the design phase or construction drawings, but they're conceptual in nature, and built in these drawings were some of the recommendations made by you, the residents, at the stakeholder meeting. So I'm not going to steal their thunder tonight, but you will see that the square footage has dropped. I think we're around close to 18,000 in Station 1, between 10 and 11 in 2. So LeMay will explain a lot of those conceptual drawings here shortly. We're really looking forward tonight to hammering through some information where you have an agenda that we're going to stick to. Time limit, I give everybody a little bit more time, but a few minutes would be great. If you're need to finish, I will allow you to do that. Remember, be kind. We all have the same goal here, and that is to get these fire stations built, and we need to move it along sooner than later. With that, I welcome everybody again, and as we move through this agenda tonight, you can see once we get towards the end, we will have a question and answer portion where we hope to have a lot more exchange between the residents here and the trustees, and we also are going to give our opinions and things of that nature, because it's time for us to come together and get these stations done and support our fire. We all support our firefighters, but we need to get these stations going as far as moving Concord forward. So with that, I'm going to give the mic over to the other trustees who would like to make opening comments.
Good evening. Thank you so much for coming. I know this is a very important meeting. There's a lot of information. You all have concerns, and we truly want to understand your concerns. We know it's challenging, a little stressful, so maybe we can all relax a little bit. Smile, take a deep breath, relax our shoulders a little bit. A positive mindset is always a good way to approach things. So to be clear, we all know that you all support our firefighters, our first responders, and you want what's best for them. You all have concerns as far as how our fire stations should look, where they should go, how much they should cost, how we're going to pay for them. We have those same concerns. But I think it's important to remember we're all on the same team. We all want our first responders to have the tools and equipment that they need to effectively do their job, the appropriate living space to be healthy, happy, to grow and prosper in their career, as well as being able to entice new team members in the future. And we all think we can do this in a fiscally responsible way. I think if you've been to the stations recently, you can appreciate the challenges, and you can surely understand how this project is long overdue. So with that in mind, I just want everybody to kind of remember this shared vision that we all have. Again, we're all on the same team. We have the same goals, as Mr. Dondorfer said. So just remember, if we can't support our firefighters, our first responders the way we want, that impact is going to impact the service that we receive as residents. Also, the service that our family members, our friends that come and visit us receive. The people that own businesses in Concord, teachers, students, healthcare workers. Fire department does a ton more than just stamp out a few fires and EMS calls every year. They're a huge part of our community. So just remember that. Thank you again for coming, and let's get this going.
Good evening. I'd also like to welcome everybody here. I'd like to thank Quail Hollow Resort for having us here a second time. It's nice to be able to meet in this venue. I'm glad that everybody that could make it here, and to those who are joining us virtually, I welcome you as well. Looking forward to this meeting. Since the last meeting, this board has spent a lot of time reviewing the information, working together on providing the information that was requested, answering the questions, and our expectation or our hope this time is that we can get into a little bit of dialogue about some of these things. So as you have questions, now understanding what that is, we're prepared to go through a dialogue about the project and to have a little bit more of a discussion maybe than we had last time. So I think we're all looking forward to that. As we've said, this is an important project. When I think about the things that drove me to make the decision to want to become a Concord trustee or an elected official and serve in my community, whether it's Concord or wherever else I would have ended up, this is the kind of thing that I think is important. This is the kind of thing that I've always envisioned wanting to contribute to my community, is being involved on a project like this. It's great to see that there are members of the community that are interested in understanding and learning. I welcome the opportunity to share what it is. I continue to learn every day that I do this job, that I'm a part of the township government, that I learn something new, and it's more than I ever thought it would when I got back involved in Concord Township many years ago, and I enjoy it. So I look forward to some dialogue this evening. I look forward to being able to get you answers to your question here, continue to get some more input, and so welcome, and thank you.
All right, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Amy. Okay, Chief Sabo with a fire department review before we get into our improvements with the architects.
Thank you all. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. It's again another great meeting, a good discussion as we make our way towards the future of safety in Concord Township. Before we get started, I'd just like to ask you all to take a moment and think about the worst day of your life. Maybe you've had to call 911 and ask for rescue. Maybe you had a fire at your residence. I want you to take a moment of silence and think about that moment. How long did that feel like? 2 minutes? Seems like a long time, doesn't it? That was 1 minute. That was only 1 minute. Now you think about when you're in distress, when you're calling 911 and you're waiting, and you're waiting, and you're waiting. And it seems like 20 minutes. I've actually received a phone call in my office. Why did it take you so long? I pulled the card. I called dispatch. How long did it take us? He said 20 minutes. It was 4. Okay? So it's all in perspective. And we can appreciate that as firefighters, as first responders. We appreciate that time. In a heart attack, we have 90 minutes to get somebody from the time we get to your house. We have 90 minutes to get them to a balloon, to a cath lab, where the vessel will be opened up. We call that EMS to balloon, 90 minutes. That's not a lot of time, folks, especially if you don't acknowledge the symptoms right away. For For a lot of people, when I call 911, the fire department shows up. That's our expectation as residents. But this doesn't happen by accident or by some miracle. There is a lot of planning by myself, by the deputy chief, by my officers, by my firefighters every day that takes place to make that happen. So let's talk about turnout time. Let's talk about our times. Everything that we do is evaluated by times. In September, ISO is coming out to evaluate us. And one of the big things they look at is our times. How long does it take us? How long does it take us to do this? How long does it take us to do that? Turnout time is the amount of time it takes from dispatch to us going en route. So the tones go off and the clock starts. That's turnout time. Response time is from dispatch to us actually showing up on scene. What we cannot control is travel time. So once we start rolling out of the station and getting to your house, that's travel time. We can't control that. We do our very best, but there's traffic, there's weather conditions, so on and so forth. So we focus on things like turnout time. We can control turnout time, the amount of time it takes us once those tones drop to get to the trucks, right? So I just had you wait for 1 minute, moment of silence for 1 minute. Our average turnout time is about 2 minutes. And it's even longer if we have to deploy an ambulance that's stored off-site or a rescue vehicle that's stored off-site. These stations were designed to reduce that turnout time, to get to you as efficiently and effectively as possible. They have the firefighters on the same level as the equipment, especially at nighttime. All response equipment is in the station and readily deployable. If you look at, well, our drawings don't show it, but later on they'll show that the actual bay space is full. There's no extra space available for future equipment. This is just to get us with the equipment that we have today. So again, I ask, how long do you want to wait? We know it takes us an additional 4 minutes to deploy the rescue squad out of the service department on off hours. If you're the one that needs that, do you want to wait? All right, we're already under the clock. We also know that in 2019, 30% of our calls were overlapping. That means we were responding to multiple incidents at the same time. Why is that a big deal? Well, it's not if I have all my equipment ready to go. I also know that we respond more times to mutual aid to our neighbors than we receive. Some might say, well, they owe us. I say they're not available because they need us more than we need them. The other issue that comes up is if I have to call Painesville City Fire Department to bring an ambulance, where are they going to take you? Tri-Point. That is your only option. If you keep the service in Concord, you have the options of Hillcrest, Lake West. So you have more options. So the goal is to keep services within our community as much as possible so we can have that level of service. Mutual aid. One of the questions that got brought up last time was, why don't we use our mutual aid partners more? We have decades of relationships with our mutual aid partners from all over the county. And we cooperate in those services. A good example is, who remembers the 75-car pileup on I-90 in 2016 in December? We couldn't have done that on our own. We didn't do it on our own. So because of those mutual services, we reduce the amount of duplicative resources. That's why I don't have plans to buy a ladder truck tomorrow. I don't need one. I have one coming from Painesville City, I have one coming from Mentor, I have one coming from Chardon, I got one coming from Willoughby Hills if I need it, I got one coming from Willoughby. They're all over the place. I have no plans to buy a ladder truck. So all that adds up to, that's what it does for you. It reduces turnout time, which reduces response time, and it gets your equipment to you as much as we can. Another question that keeps coming up is the relationship with Auburn Career Center. Did you know that Concord Fire Department was the fire academy for Auburn Career Center for years? And actually, a lot of the lead instructors were Concord firefighters and still are today. One of my lieutenants is the lead instructor for Auburn Career Center. We have that relationship. Are they planning a training center? Yeah. Nothing's being done. If it was being built, yeah, maybe I'd consider it. But there's safety concerns to be thought about. It's open to the weather, so I can't, if it's snowing, raining, it's not available. It's first available to the students that pay tuition. So that's not an option. So if it's being used by the students, my guys can't use it. It also takes the firefighters out of the station. I'd rather keep them in the station, ready to respond. Auburn Career Center continues to use our facilities. They come to us, even today, because they don't have anywhere to train. They go to Perry Fire Department, they go to Willoughby Fire Department. They go to all the fire departments all over the area. I hope they make progress on their training center. I really do. Another topic that got brought up last time is in regards to fitness. Our current stations have fitness facilities, and the new stations have fitness facilities for our firefighters. Due to COVID, we're supposed to keep 6 foot distance, right? 6 feet, 6 foot radius. That's 113 square feet. Station 2, their fitness room is 140 square feet currently. So I can't have 2 people working out at the same time, even without COVID. There's not enough space. Station 1's is 182 square feet. So why is fitness important? Well, we all know the obvious, right? Firefighting is a demanding job. But there's another element that many people don't understand, nor should you. It's the mental health aspect of firefighting. Some of our firefighters are in the room today. They get back from a call, a bad trauma on 90. Some of them hit the gym to relieve that stress. And that's an important element to keeping them mentally fit. In the fire service, we have a motto in regards to training. We don't train until we get it right. We train until we cannot get it wrong. That takes time and effort. We want to reduce injury. Training has been found to reduce injury and death in firefighters. That's an important element. So we want to make sure we can, if we have an opportunity to integrate training into the fire stations, then we should take advantage of that. And it's available to us year-round for ladder training, rope training, entanglement, forcible entry, victim removal, mazes, rappelling, hose advancement, standpipes, sprinklers, and the list goes on. All the different elements of training that we could take advantage of. And it keeps the firefighters in-house as much as possible. So that's a good element. If Station 1 is working out or training at Auburn Career Center, then that side of town's not covered, right? I can't afford to bring in overtime while they go to train at Albert Career Center. I don't have that money. I don't have that budget. Some of the other things that I've been hearing about the fire stations, and I'll curtail them right now, there is no swimming pool, there is no hot tub, and there is no sauna. Sorry, fellas, for the firefighters in the room. There are none of those elements. So I'll tell you right now that that's all not true, if you hear that. Every space has a purpose, and every space has been carefully thought out. Nothing we do is by accident. Everything is well planned, and I'm really proud of the work that LeMay did for us on these new renditions. I'm very pleased with them. So I want to thank you all again for coming, and I appreciate all your support just by being here and just having that concern and that wanting to learn more about fire department operations and how our operations affected how we came up with those plans. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Chris and Katie from LeMay Erickson, they're going to go over the new conceptual drawings for Station 1 and 2 and tell you what they've accomplished here. So turn it over to them. Thank you.
It's great to be back. Katie and I shared last time, for anybody new in the room, I'm Christopher Katie. I'm one of the design principals with LeMay Erickson Wilcox Architects. This is Katie Atwater, one of our associates. Katie and I work together almost exclusively on public safety and fire station projects. We use a catchphrase that it's an honor to serve those that serve others, and it's more than a catchphrase. The likes of working with Chief and his team is something we take a lot of pride in. We specialize in, and as architects, we focus on the design and construction of buildings. This building type, we're able to do a small part in assisting firefighters and saving lives. We take that role very seriously. The turnout time that Chief mentioned is the component that we can be involved in designing the facilities that support the fast, safe response from that alert, the station alerting within the building, to getting our firefighters out doing their important duties. So we're excited to be here. We're used to this process. We greatly appreciate the feedback we got last time, both in the written comments, the comments that were made during the meeting. We had some great conversations before and after last time. And the revisions and the changes that we'll be talking about here in the drawings directly came from that feedback. So we tried to work with, listen to that, work with Chief and his team, and find ways within his operations where we could actually tighten down the buildings a little bit. So with the two buildings, Katie, you actually have some of the percentages that we'll talk about in the reductions that we made to the overall building size. And with that, we'll go to the next slide and we'll take a look at the drawings.
Thank you.
So Station 1, the big item that came up there was considering the site and the location of the building. So we were asked to take a look and see would the building fit on the soccer field site rather than at the parking lot on location near its current location and town hall. And obviously per this kind of very preliminary site plan sketch, the answer is yes. From a feasibility standpoint, we looked, we did make some building modifications. We'll show you that on the next slide. Reducing the footprint, reducing the overall shape a little bit, taking advantage of topography. Even though what you see right now is the soccer field is a relatively flat site. Anybody that remembers before that modification was made, the natural grade actually goes down into a swale. And what we've done is take advantage of that for actually a lower level basement area that's able, again, to reduce that footprint even further. So I think the number, we reduced the footprint by 20%, Katie? And we were able to compress and take advantage of that site. So I think in the end, for a lot of reasons, specifically looking at the building, I think it fits well here. And everything we've heard of the community and the importance of the other site for other activities and functions that go on within the township, we think this actually looks like it could be a great option for the project. The same, a little bit of what's shown, you see the main parking lot. We worked on the sizing and the number of spaces there based on, with Chief, based on the anticipated staffing. One of the things we talk about with fire stations is the change of crew. When they come in the morning, you have essentially 2 full crews on site at one time. so making sure we have parking that accommodates that. We also do have a training room for the fire department that will have a little bit higher capacity that we want to make sure we have parking for that. So that's what's reflected to kind of the page right east end of the site plan. Orange is the overall building footprint, and then essentially the drive-through bays, similar to what was proposed previously, what we call a bypass lane that lets the vehicle kind of drive around and come in from the backside to drive through those bays. Katie, any other site plan notes?
I think two quick things. One, this is very conceptual. It's also easier to see if you look in the back. I know this is tiny, even for me. But the conceptual nature of this means it's not 100% finished. So things like the shape of the parking, how close the parking is to the trees, where exactly there may need to be retaining walls, how the drive aisles work, that kind of stuff, if we move forward with this scheme, would be fully fleshed out as we go forward. This is kind of just, as Christopher mentioned, a feasibility study or a test fit. Could it work if we use this site? And the answer is yes, if we proceed with that. You also can't really see here, but it's easier to see in the back for anybody that looked at it. There is the lower level that Christopher mentioned is in the top right corner. There's kind of a rectangle there that's intended as I'll call it a walkout basement. It's a lower level, as Christopher mentioned, it's built into the grade, so you would be able to get windows in that area and potentially a small patio for the functions down there to kind of give them some outdoor space as well, based on the grade that's set up there. I think the other comment just is the front of the station. You can see the existing station 1 at the bottom of the image there. So that's 608 running across the page. The main entrance would be off of that, and then there would be potentially a walk down to the basement in the back is what that's showing. Go ahead.
Next slide. So along with that, just as we're looking at revising the footprint, the floor plan, again, taking some of the feedback directly that we heard last time, were there ways where we could tighten down some of the spaces, maximize some efficiencies of those spaces, and again, take advantage of that, the topography on the soccer field site and developing a basement. And with the key focus on looking at chief's operations, keeping the day spaces, the kitchen day dining, and the bunk spaces all on that main level. Those are the primary spaces that the firefighters will be responding from. So all of that focusing on those direct lines, very simple lines of response from all those spaces, and then carefully selecting the spaces that might move to a basement. In this case, we've identified likely the exercise room and a training room that would move down to that lower level space, still providing direct response opportunities via the stairs, run up straight towards the bays, but those are the spaces that seem the best to move down to a lower level. And as Katie said, ideally we're also allocating windows and still getting some natural light into those spaces based on the topography. Let's see, any other keynotes from the floor plans? Or, as Katie had noted, they're kind of still very preliminary. That's why there aren't doors, windows, and such. Our goal really here was to take the program, work with Chief, look at ways to kind of tighten down the belt, if you will, to the magnitude of roughly, as we said, about 20% in the footprint, and resulting in that, and just kind of representing the basic circulation and spaces. And the next step, we'll be moving into further design development. Station 2, Katie, you want to talk a little bit about this one?
Sure. So I think similar to what Christopher just said about Station 1, coming out of the last stakeholder meeting, we heard the comments about tightening it down, making it more efficient, trying to squeeze every square foot we could out of that station. So we went back and looked at it with Chief, looked at the program, what the wants and the needs were, and kind of getting rid of those wants and sticking to really what is needed for the department to function in that station. It's not big. We cut out what we could. We ended up reducing the footprint of this one from, I'm gonna get the numbers wrong. It was about 1,000 square feet that came out. It came down about 10%, and that was largely in consolidating the circulation inside. So for those that remember the previous footprint, the north-south corridor, there were 2 of those that were not necessary, so we consolidated that into 1. That helped also bring down the response time because you don't have to navigate multiple corridors. There's just the 1 corridor. And then reallocating some of the space up front for the shift officer quarters, moving the fitness space to the back, making that a little bit of a multi-purpose space, recognizing that if this station doesn't have a lot of administrative space, it's just really that operations office in the front and the shift officer space. So if the exercise room needs to double as a conference room or something like that, it could. It's located centrally enough that it could be multifunctional if necessary. And then kind of just tightening down a little bit of the other spaces to kind of squeeze that square footage out. I think one of the other questions that came up earlier, this footprint is a little bit more developed because it's gone through schematic design. It has a little bit more of pushing and pulling on the exterior. It's not just a box. But that is to give us recessed spaces underneath of the roof. So the intent is the whole right side, from the green at the bottom to the orange and blue at the top, is under a singular roof that has a single mass. So those pushes and pulls aren't pushes and pulls that are making things more complicated or more expensive. That's within the building footprint, or within the roof plan, I guess, pushing and pulling to kind of give you a little covered patio where needed, or covered doors where we want those as well.
That's a little bit that, some graphics to just represent what Katie was describing with the exterior of the building. You see, some of that push and pull of the exterior wall, but under that simple volume of the roof to maximize efficiency and primarily work on covering those openings at the front entrance and the rear patio. I think that's it. And just in closing, I just want to thank again everybody that offered comments last time. This is a process that we're very used to. We welcome the feedback. We're all working together as a team to ultimately make this project successful and serve the firefighters as best we can. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Katie. So it was important to the board with these conceptual designs to present them to the community before we move forward as far as design, development, and construction drawings. So that's why we wanted to present this tonight with input from the community here once we get to the question and answer section, as well as our architects. I will tell you collectively as a board, the trustees, we believe that with these conceptual drawings, we are a needed space. I mean, there's no want anymore here that we could take out here. This is needed space that are going to sustain the firefighters and Concord firefighting for the next 50 or 60 years. This space is needed. I mean, I don't really see any more wanted space, and I think I can speak collectively on behalf of the board for that. So with that, it's always important to know and understand as a community what our finances are, and sometimes it's overwhelming because we have different parts of our financing accounts and things of that nature. So I asked Mr. Rose, our administrator, to go over the township finances again, as well as talk about some options of how we are going to fund these projects, because we're going to have some dialogue tonight on what the best approach to that will be. So with that, Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Dondorfer. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for those in the virtual room as well. I think there's 10 or 11 of you, so I appreciate your time. I know everybody came here waiting to hear Andy Rose talk about money, because that's what everybody's favorite thing is, right? Okay, let's do a quick look at, I'm sorry, I got to change the slide so folks in the virtual room can see. Okay. We're going to look at township finances. This is a little bit more robust presentation for those of you that saw my last presentation, and these slides will be available on the township website at some point tomorrow. We will load up the diagrams that are in the back, and we will load these up as well so you can see them. These are based on 2019. These are the funds that can be used for fire station construction. There's the general fund, fire operations levy, safety services levy, and then there's a capital projects fund. Capital projects fund is not property tax driven. That comes from hotel tax, sewer assessments, grants such as NOPEC, and I think we touched on that during the last stakeholder meeting. I think there's about 60,000 in that. 2019, the current revenue was 1.54 million. We spent 1.8. We had planned a carryover from 18 into 19 for some land acquisition, and we're also we increased our engineering contract with Hull to do some work in preparation for cemetery expansion. If somebody wants to know more about that, you can give me a call. Fire operations, safety services levy, 1.7 and 2.5 million respectively. No room in the budget to finance a fire station there. Capital projects, we have the fiscal officer, Amy Dawson, has been very diligent and very tight-fisted with the capital projects fund, knowing that this fire station, so there's $632,000 that's sitting in the capital projects fund that is part of the Station 2 budget. JED funds can be utilized to service debt. That brings in approximately $750,000 right now, and I'll get into a lot more detail on that on the next slide. One thing to keep in note, the reason I didn't use 2020 numbers is because it's still being projected out. The state has given us paperwork the state sent it to the auditor, the county auditor sent it to us. We're going to take a 15.3% reduction in the local government fund from the state. All communities in Lake County are. How many of you think that next year the state's going to say, gee, I'm really sorry you took a hit in 2020. Here's more money in 2021. Anybody think they're going to do that? When the state taketh away, they never, ever give back. They did it in 2008, they did it in 2010, and they're doing it in 2020. Next slide. Budget. A lot of questions about the budget. I've gotten numerous phone calls. I know the trustees have, chief, deputy chief. It was a question that's come up at the last stakeholder meeting. Budget for Station 1 is $8 million for construction, and 10% for contingencies. Okay? We'll have to bond that. We don't have $8 million and another 10% in cash. Okay? But the bond won't exceed $8 million. Debt service on that bond would be approximately, at today's interest rate, $431,000 a year for 27 years. That's at a 2.95 favorable bond rate. Station 2, budget set for $4.5 million for construction and another 10% for contingencies. We plan to pay for that with cash. That's as simple as it gets. Next slide, please. You've seen this slide before. Old plan. I'm not gonna dig up that old bone. But Station 1, there's basically two options. The land lease project, the land lease option is out there, but it is not practical. It is not feasible, but it is an option. But we've scratched that. We can bond the project using general obligation bond issuance, or we can bond the project with voter backing based on the interest rates and the amount of $8 million. We think that would result in a 0.63 mil. I don't have the exact number. That would have to come from the auditor at the appropriate time. And for those of you who are doing math in your head, 0.63 is about 25% less than what was asked for in the last levy, and it comes out to about $22 per 100. $22. And then cash for Station 2, that has not changed. Next slide. This slide gets a little busy, and I'll apologize. So I'm gonna walk through this because this is important. If we bond this with a voter-approved levy, and I'm going to emphasize if. Okay, we have the ability to pay that debt off early. Okay, we can use the levy money to service the debt on the bond. We can utilize the JED funds for an early payoff. We can also maintain a good reserve for emergencies, road repairs, unforeseen events. I put an example up there. JED revenue right now is approximately $750,000 a year. If no immediate need presents itself, the majority of those JED funds would go towards the principal amount. Bonds typically have a lockout period. Depending on how you structure them, they can be for 7 years to 10 years, where it protects the investors and lets them make money on their investment. And so there's a lockout period where you cannot pay down debt in the first I'll call it 7 years, but it could go 10. So you place the excess revenue, that's an oxymoron, there's no such thing as excess revenue, but You take that money and you put it in an interest earning account, and then once the lockout window is open, you then take all that money that you want to apply towards the principal, and then you put it towards the principal, and it reduces that. After 2028, because please remember, the JED contract expires in 2028. It must be renegotiated. That JED agreement is between the Concord Township and the city of Painesville. And in the event that the JED funds that we receive, the percentage is lower due to the contract negotiations, we would still have funds available to be applied to debt retirement, and we would still have funds available for unforeseen emergencies. If we bond the project without a voter-approved levy, I don't see any ability to pay the debt off early. It's going to run 27 years. JED revenue is the primary source of the debt service. The remainder of the JED revenue would be utilized for emergencies, road repairs, unforeseen events. JED revenue is, again, the example, $750,000 a year. After debt service, you're down to about $319 until 2028. After 2028, that amount gets lowered, but there would still be a little bit of money left over. I put an example. How many of you watched the last trustees meeting? And then the trustee meeting before that, we had Nancy Ann Drive. We peeled off. It was supposed to be a simple resurfacing. It was part of the joint resurfacing project. And they peeled the top layer, and they didn't find any base underneath the road, and it was all mud. And so we had to do a special meeting, if I remember, in order to authorize funds. And we spent an additional unbudgeted $203,000. We had to pull out of the air and rearrange and figure that out. So that stuff happens. I think it was Morley Hills about 10 years ago. That was about a $1.2 million emergency road repair. And there's been some other ones where they've peeled back the road in the $200,000-$300,000 range. It happens. You got various roofs. You got building maintenance, different things like that. Roofs get expensive, and keeping up with periodic maintenance. Next slide. Other factors to consider: without a specific bond levy, without a voter-approved bond levy, the interest rate's going to be higher. It's just a fact. The interest rate's going to be higher. We cannot, I think we've covered this before, but we cannot pledge JED funds. JED funds, because the agreement ends before the life of the bond ends, it cannot be used to pledge as collateral, if you will. We can service the debt all we want with the JED dollars before and after 2028. But you can't pledge the JED to run because you can't guarantee it's going to run the 27 years to try to lower that interest rate. There's no room in the existing property tax revenue to finance the project with the inside millage, fire ops, safety services levy. There's not enough hotel tax, grant money, sewer assessments to fund it through the capital projects fund. Other than NOPEC, which is that $60,000 that the fiscal officer brought up at the last meeting, there are no other grants or assistance available from any outside sources to offset costs. The state, we met with our state representatives. They won't support a fire station in the capital budget, which went away this year, but even if it had gone forward pre-COVID, we laid that groundwork, and they said, no, we can build a restroom for a park, but we can't build a fire station. The State House sets that priority for the capital budget. No community was eligible to put in for a fire station or any type of firefighting or safety services work in the capital budget during this last cycle. So that concludes my presentation. So I've given you some financing options. I've given you a picture of what the budgets are for Station 1 and Station 2, and then some revenue outlooks. and I will be happy to answer any and all questions at the appropriate time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rose.
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's important to note out before we get into some dialogue, because I learned this early on, well, once I became elected, but the budget estimate that we're throwing out there is just that. It's an estimate. It's a forecast of a proposal or plan budget. Once we find and secure a funding source and it goes to a fixed competitive bid, that's when we get into pricing with a specific entity for a determined amount of services at a determined price. For example, there was comparison made when we had dialogue before with Lyndhurst Fire Department. When that went out, budget estimate was $5.6 million. It came in, when it went to fixed competitive bid at 21% less, it was 4.4 for the construction project. So I'm not saying that's going to happen here. It's important to understand the difference between numbers we're throwing out initially as a budget estimate versus once we actually secure the funding and go out to get fixed competitive bids. The dollar amount may be less. So with that, I'd like to call up the other trustees, and we've made no decision. That's why we're here today, to have dialogue and to get input. So at this point in time, we'd like to solicit some input from the audience that is here and get your, okay, sorry, Morgan.
I just want to add a little bit of sketching a detail or so on something that Mr. Rose said with respect to the JED. The JED isn't going away. The contract has to renew periodically through the entire term of it. So we're coming up to a renewal point, which is the point where we're limited. So I just wanted to make that distinction that it's not going to go away. We have the year, it's a 100-year agreement with 20-year renewals. Is that correct? Something like that? Yeah.
Right.
So that's what we're talking about, is that a renewal of the terms are coming up. So those percentages are available to change, but the JED is not going to go away.
All right, with that, like I said, we'd like to get into some dialogue with people that are here, and people that are here virtually, please, we'll give you some time to chime in. We haven't made any decisions, but we would like to hear your thoughts on how we accomplish both of these stations and move this project forward. So, ma'am, in the back, I'll bring the microphone to
Oh,
you.
hang on, Carl. Why don't you let me run the microphone?
Okay.
It's easier that way. I can keep people tight. Hi, ma'am. Safe here. Thanks.
My name is Kitty Langley. My husband and I live over on Conley Road. One of the first things going through with this fire department, today we paid our property taxes. And I took a real good look at our bill. Our total bill was just under $3,000. And of that $3,000, there's only $487 that goes to Concord. I'm assuming out of that $487 that that's going to fund the fire department, our police response from the sheriff's department, road repairs, service department salaries, zoning and salaries, administrative offices, the staff in the administrative salaries, township trustees' salaries, the upkeep of all the buildings and properties, and cemetery expenses. Now that's what Concord is getting out of $3,000. I also took a long look at this, the group that's called ACT. It's Concord citizens who are supposed to be looking out for our tax dollars. The first thing that really bothered me was there's an app called Nextdoor. There was a lot of postings by the ACT group, and I posted questions to them. I couldn't get an answer. So what I did do is go to the website that they had listed. The website had several things, general comments. I'd like to comment on that. The first thing was, it says that the facilities and accompanying resources must be in line with the size and emergency response requirements of our community. Who here can say that Concord is not growing? How many of you have driven around and seen the expanse of businesses and homes? Please tell me that we have less need for emergency services. Another statement they made is that they think that it will not require additional taxes as other options need to be fully explored. You know, when I started driving a car, gas was 33 cents a gallon. It's not that anymore. Anybody that goes out today and really thinks you're going to get something for nothing, you're mistaken. You're going to get exactly what you pay for. Another thing that I noticed in their statements on their website, utilizing multi-rooms instead of single-purpose rooms. I've looked at a lot of the plans. Yeah, I've seen a couple areas that were single-service rooms, bathrooms and kitchens. That's about it. I couldn't really see where there was any waste. The new design I'm looking at today, I'm not happy with, and I'll tell you why. One of the important things we need to do is protect our firefighters and those who protect us. If you looked at any of this, you would see that they did zones, red zone, yellow zone, green zone. What do I see here? They've got a red zone to protect the equipment they have today, the staffing they have today. We're going to be spending a lot of money, and we're not going to be able to look out for what's happening tomorrow. Is the building in Concord going to stop today? I don't think so. It also discussed on that page sharing of equipment and training facilities. Concord has done that for not years, decades. Decades have guided this department. They have not wasted money. They've done the best that they can do. The problem is that Concord is growing. It started out a part-time department, and now it's full-time. You expect professional services, and you need to pay for them.
Real quick, though, thank you for your comments. I will respond. There are going to be the transitional zones.
And are they ready for next week's business? Or are they for today?
Well, they're going to be the.
How long are they going to be good if they're smaller?
To address specifically the hot zone transition type areas,
Yes.
those are unchanged from the previous plan. That
Yeah.
portion, the bays and the response areas, I don't think that makes.
Okay. Yeah, because these are just the
Those
footprint.
areas are unchanged. The changes were on the house side.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great question.
Anybody?
I see you, sir. I'll get you next.
Thank you. Claudia Hamfield. I live on Concord Hamden Road. To the lady who just spoke, thank you very much. I'm not picking on you like I am on some here. My family moved to Concord in 1960 from Mentor. I've watched a high percentage of you discover what a nice place this is and chose to build homes and live here. I'm saddened, dismayed, and frustrated by what I hear from those who are near or at retirement age. We are on a fixed income. Concord keeps raising its taxes. We don't need a big fire station. No one tells me what's going on. Think, people. Our brains still work. We really haven't lost our ability to think. Change never stops, period. Nor does inflation. One does not need to be retired to be on a fixed income. You have many accurate sources of what's going on, resources. Watch the meetings on TV. Watch them on the website. Read meeting transcripts on the website. You can have accurate information by putting forth a little effort. Call town hall or a trustee with your questions. You used to be able to do all these things before you became a senior. Why have you stopped? Concord takes less than 17% of your real estate taxes, the best value of all on your taxes. Be an informed voter. Lake County is a very generous place to live with very many services available. The school systems take at least 1/2 of your real estate taxes. Look at your tax bill. Thank you for looking at yours. So you know where your money is going. The auditor's website is available 24/7 and the office is open Monday to Friday, 8 to 4:30, and they will be happy to talk with you. Concord has always been diligent about maintenance and upgrading property. Specifically, we're talking here tonight about the fire station. They have done all they can do with what they have. Everyone has been transparent, eager to provide information, and willing to hear you and work with you, but they keep getting put down. They have been honest and forthright. Now, for the 50% plus portion of your taxes, not so much. The last Riverside levy had no parcel chosen before you voted them a blank check to do what they wanted, wherever they wanted. They listen to citizens, but do what they want anyway. That unfortunately is the way the state has school systems set up, as well as how they are funded. But that's another topic for another day. The bottom line is your taxes will always go up. Schools don't have to listen to you if you say no to a levy. They just penalize the children with less programs. They are, statewide, poor stewards of their properties. They get to a given point in the building's life and say, we need new now. Your fire department needs your help to provide a facility that provides decontamination facilities for the staff, space for vehicles, so we don't have to spend $200,000 plus to modify a brand new ambulance so it will fit in our buildings, plus all of the other things you have and are being told about tonight and before. You are perfectly capable of doing your own homework easily and don't need to be spoon-fed information. You are smarter than that. Look at the entire picture. Don't punish the hands that save you.
Thanks.
Mark Stedman, I live over here in Auburn. I don't understand why one fire station is estimated to be $8 million and station number 2 is estimated to be 5.1. I don't see why $3 million more has to be spent at fire station number 1 over number 2. Where we need 4 bays, we need storage, we need ample room for our firefighters, we need gyms, we need locker rooms, sleep areas, and we need a kitchen. So I don't understand how you can justify the additional $3 million, but I imagine as meetings go on, we'll get to that further on. I've been out here in Concord since '87. God, 30 years. My taxes have gone up. And little improvement as far as I'm concerned. The new developments seem to get it all. The older sections, like where I'm in, we stay the same. We don't change. And I don't understand it, but I'm sure that will come out too as the new trustees are in order, that maybe we'll have better representation and we'll have more honesty and we'll go from there. The one thing that was said tonight that I did not appreciate came from the trustee and the fire chief, selling us on fear, telling us if we don't get this, the response time is going to be less. You might die. I don't appreciate that. I've had EMS at my house, and they responded and took care of me. But don't push the fear factor on us that if we don't give you the extra $3 million for fire station number 1, that people are going to start dying. That's uncalled for. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah, Andy,
Andy, we want to.
we would just address these one at a time. After we would address the
Sure.
issue on the square footage and the money. I don't know.
I think I'll take on the square footage and the size of the projects first. I think the 5.5 was from last year. Was that a rough on too? And that
was the original budget.
right. Now that it's been redone, that number will change. The difference between, and I may ask Chris or Katie to fill in a little bit here, but Station 1 is a headquarters station and it has fire administration in it, which accounts for, have that number, about 2,000 square feet, and that's unchanged from the amount of space that it consumes now. So there's that, there's a training room. So it's the headquarters station, it has more storage, and it has some of the things that the second station or satellite doesn't, and I don't recall the bay count, so I don't know if you...
Yeah, just in brief, the headquarters station versus a satellite station is the main cost. So they're primarily the administrative office spaces for the chief, deputy chief, and the administrative team. There is a large training room as part of the component. And to your bays, it's 2 bays in satellite station versus 4 in the station 1. So it's very different operational functions that are housed within the 2 buildings.
And fire prevention as well.
And the fire prevention office that is currently over in the Station 2 site is being moved to the alignment with the administrative offices where it ideally would be located. Thank you.
I don't, does either of you guys have anything to? No. You?
Yeah, so I wanted to explore a little further with you, because it sounds like you're upset about some of the things we mentioned is, we're not trying to instill fear. So I apologize if you read that incorrectly.
That was the first thing that you said.
Well,
Your opening statement was bringing up the fear factor. That was then doubled up by the fire chief when he had us take our moment of 1 minute and progressed on and talked about the fear factor, about not being able to respond in time. And quite frankly, I don't appreciate it, because I don't think anyone in this room would ever find fault with the response time of our fire department. But don't push that as being your selling point to put these fire stations up here at $8 million apiece. I don't want to hear that. Because let me
Go ahead.
say this. I was out in Madison today, and I was on 528 307, and I stopped in at their fire station to look at that facility. And that facility is state-of-the-art, and it is beautiful. And it cost them under $5 million to build that 3 years ago. So, I mean, it's like, okay, you go ahead and sell whatever you want to sell, however you want to sell it, but at the same token, don't tell me that your square footage price has got to increase by almost $3 million to build another fire station if you throw another 2 bays in. What are you talking about, $600 a square foot?
No.
Okay, $300 a square foot. That to me seems a little high. Well,
But those fire stations were built, how many years back? It's trouble, and the construction costs are going up between 5 and 7%.
construction costs have gone up 8.6% in the past 11 years. 8.6, and you're putting this out for a competitive bid. You're probably going to see this come down by another 15-16%.
Well,
So
that's what I was talking about when I made the comparison initially about what happened. The comparison with Lyndhurst, when they went out to a budget estimate, it was 5.6, and when they went to fix competitive bid, it wound up being finished at 4.4, which was
Yes.
1% less.
and I appreciate the fact you brought that up, because that's a good point. But if you're going to try and sell this to the township, this is what you have to emphasize on as far as what the true cost is going to be. Don't give me worst case scenario. Don't tell me be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. I don't want to hear that. I want actual figures.
Right, but we can't go out for fixed competitive bid until we have guaranteed the financial funding for that, because the contractors spend a lot of time and investment and money doing fixed competitive bids, and they won't do it unless they know there's guaranteed financing.
Okay, all right.
And none of us are trying to instill a fear factor. That's not, we are all collectively are here to think about.
I don't know if you were present.
Because the virtual people can't, I'm trying to,
make sure that everybody.
I'm not sure if you came to the last meeting last month or not, okay. So last month, when we had the first meeting, we had several questions about people asking us, what do we get for this? So one of the things we wanted to address was improvement in response time. Is maybe the point of what we're trying to get across with respect to that. I don't think anybody here is saying that our response times will get worse or be eroded because we don't do this. What we're trying to do is connect the benefit of what happens when you build a more modern station. You know, we've talked about some things. Right now in Station 1, they have to run down stairs. Now if we're getting them on the one level, we're getting all kinds of equipment that's scattered about in one place. I had actually had a thought many years ago. I was walking my dog in Girdle Park, and I was finishing coming up in the north parking lot. And for those that are familiar with Girdle Park, you have two options there. On that particular entrance, you can do a short loop around a pond, or you can go down some stairs and up along a ridge. And as I pulled into the parking lot, Concord Fire showed up. And they started going down that ridge. And I hadn't seen anything, but I thought, wow, somebody must really be in trouble. They're walking down that ridge. So I went to Chief and I said, if you're going to do a rescue like that, I'm guessing your response time's longer than those 3 to 4 and maximum of 7 minutes, 7 to 8 minutes on that southwest corner of the township that we read about. It's probably a lot longer. And I said, I understand you keep a rescue vehicle in the red barn, the Gator. It's a John Deere tractor. And he said, yeah, we do. And I said, so if you've got a 20-minute response time to some kind of a situation like that, you got to go get that thing. Oh, yeah. And by the way, it's staged over there, and where it's staged and how it's staged, we can't put it on a trailer. So we get that call, we got to go do it. We got to get the truck out. We got to get the trailer out. We got to get the Gator out. We got to put all of it together, and then we got to get it on site, to which we're responding to an emergency that's longer than your typical, we're not pulling up in an EMS rig to a driveway and going into somebody's living room to deal with a heart attack. We're dealing with an aggressive rescue. So when we talk about response time, again, we're reacting to the questions we were asked about how is this going to improve service in Concord. And I would respectfully ask that you appreciate the context we're trying to put it in, and nobody here is trying to suggest that if we don't do this, it's going to get worse. I don't think that's the case at all.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the context of my discussion, was that we have an opportunity to take steps to reduce that response time by getting the vehicles into the building, by getting the firefighters on the same floor. The firefighters do a fantastic job, like you've alluded to, in getting to you as quickly as possible. There are situations where, and that's why I brought up the stacked calls, where we're responding to multiple events at the same time, and the importance of having those vehicles readily accessible to us and deployable. So if I came across that way, I apologize. My point is that this can improve what you're already used to. And that's what our goal is. We always are working towards improving. And that's why we plan, we train, we do everything we can every day to improve services. And this is just one way to do that. So I apologize if I came across that way. Thank you for your comments. Thank you.
Yeah, and I echo that. We're responsible for the safety of the community. We're stewards of the community. So we do care about your health and your safety. It's not meant as a fear factor. It's meant as something to improve that and to keep it healthy for years to come.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Faith Andrews, and I live on Prouty Road, 10441. We mentioned that the JED, there's a 100-year agreement. It's not going away, but it needs to be renegotiated every 20 years. What makes you think that the money that is coming in from the JED will be lower? Is there step-downs built in? Why do you think that it's going to be lower? That's my first question. And then the second part of that question, I guess, is because it's a 100-year, agreement, why would that preclude us from pledging those funds? Is it because you can think that there might not be enough money to be able to cover the pledge, or is it something that a financial institution, a lender, would have an issue with? The third thing is that I thought I heard somebody, or maybe I saw a question or something somewhere, I don't know, about possibly, is there an asset that you could unload, get rid of, that you could pledge, like property? Property that was purchased when there was going to be a town hall center or something like that, I don't know. So that's what I've got.
Have Mr. Rose answer that as far as the JED. It's a little involved.
I'll walk
as
to the
far as
middle.
Percentages.
Right now, the Concord Painesville JED, we get 75% of the revenue. Painesville gets 25% of the revenue. We are the highest collecting JED community in the state of Ohio. Nobody's got a 75-25. I don't know who worked that out. Kudos to whoever it was from the Concord Township side. I am realistic and looking forward. I fully expect that this JED will migrate to a 60-40. Maybe I doubt it will go to 50-50 because we've got the land and we provide the services to those businesses on our side. The reason is in talking with bond counsel, because while the JEDs could live for 100 years, what financial investors look at is what's the monetary amount during this period. And the monetary amount ends in 2028 because we cannot say it's going to be 60-40, we're guessing this much. It's going to be 50. We can't define what that is, so it doesn't count towards the investors. As far as the town center goes, that's on hold. This new board is 7 months old. And between COVID and the fires, and you know, I'm not trying to turn COVID into the excuse for everything, it's not. We're still conducting business, we're still having meetings and doing everything we need to do. But we need to have an economic development strategic planning meeting and figure out if we're going to keep the Risinger concept that was developed by the previous board and move that forward and try to market that. The second thing is, nobody's developing any retail or office property right now. I would, personally, I'd love to sell the 7 acres. If somebody makes me a really nice offer, I'll make arrangements to put it on the agenda to sell it. Realistically, that property's worth, I don't know, 7 acres in a commercial corridor. Let's call it 1.2, 1.3 million. 1.5 million. It's still not going to be enough to overcome the 8 million. While it lessens the burden, absolutely, it's not going to be enough to offset the whole thing. And you know, hopefully a developer comes along and they're in the JED, and that further bolsters the JED. But that's the story. I hope I've answered your questions. Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
I'd like to just add a little bit with respect to the JED. Yes, Mr. Rose is correct about, I think that's why, because their percentages might change is the principal thing there. Now, there are some issues with respect to Painesville and how they're servicing their end of the obligation, which they haven't completed all of it too. So it's very foggy. I think Mr. Rose is being conservative and probably appropriate, so to anticipate that it might drop off a little bit. With respect to the JED, Town Center, and the 7 acres, yes, the last board purchased it. We could sell it. I don't know, if we'd fetch what we paid for it or not, so I don't know that liquidation is the thing there. As Mr. Rose said, this board hasn't taken up the issue with respect to the JED and economic development. Now, holding that 7 acres or having that land there with respect to economic development in Concord Township means that one of the objections, or there's a bit of controversy about how we may develop that area. And one of the things I know from being on the zoning board for 10 years is people come in and say, well, why are you letting that happen with the land? Okay, well, because zoning allows for it. So I know that the last board had several reasons for which they pursued the purchase of that land, and one of them was to market it as far as what could go in there. So Concord maintains a level of control over that 7 acres as far as incentivizing economic development. I sit on the JED board, and we just recently had our delayed 2020 strategic planning where we talked about the trends and the shifts and things as far as economic development. And this board, the trustees will need to take up that topic and have a conversation about that as well. So whether it's a town hall, town center concept with mixed use development, as Mr. Rose alluded to with respect to the Risinger proposal, or if it's a shift, regardless is the JED is a vehicle that was put in place to generate tax revenue for Concord to aid in its growth. We're a township, we don't collect income tax. So we have that as something to deal with rainy day. You heard him talk about some of the things that have hit the township out of left field that we have to deal with, and that is something, I think it came up last month about potentially funding another fire station. We see growth there. Well, the JED's going to collect money to help us fund that, so we maybe aren't in the position that we are today with respect to we got to come up with a way to pay for that kind of thing. So that's what it was for, and it's still very viable, and there's a lot of different directions that project in economic development can take.
Yeah, and real quick, just to follow up on that, because we're talking about financings and projected expenses, and I know, Bob, you had a question about our 10-year plan and what we were looking at with different things. This fire station is pretty much our priority. I mean, we have some things as far as road maintenance that we do. We get funding through the Ohio Public Works, OPWC. That's is that every year or what, Tim? Is that it?
Right now,
Right.
OPWC is closed out for round 34.
Okay.
But remember, with OPWC, you have to put in matching funds on top of.
Right. So we'll have road maintenance that we're looking at over the next several years. We do have money budgeted for an ambulance, I think, either late this year or next year, which is about $250,000. We rotate some service vehicles. I think a dump truck will be coming in next year as part of our vehicle rotation. But as far as the town center, that's pretty much on the back burner. We haven't even looked at it. The fire station is our objective right now, and being responsible and fiscally responsible in that regard as far as how we proceed through the township. So let's go virtually for a minute and give somebody online. If we have somebody online that has a question, then we'll come back to the audience.
Yes, I do.
Here, you want to work that?
Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, I'm Linda Kangas, Cascade Road. I've been pretty confused and a little bit outraged at pricing that for the beginning design of our Station 1 right from the beginning. I think normal people who build houses aren't acquainted with the costs that it gets into when we're in a big project like this. The original cost for the design development, as I understand it, for the Station 1 was $416,000. And I understand that at this point, there'll be some changes made in it, and is it right that is a projected cost of $305,000? If that ballpark is correct, I thought $700,000 was a whole lot for the design and the paperwork and that type of thing for this project. I also understand that there's an additional $1.4 million that would ensue to develop the construction documents and to see the end of the project. And that does not include the actual construction, and which I guess you need to go and get bids for that. But my question is, what types of company comparisons, did you originally endeavor to compare with the company that you chose and other companies that might be and would be less costly?
Oh, thank you, Mrs.
So
King.
we're talking of over $2 million just to get the things on paper, and that's a lot.
Yes, ma'am, that is a lot of money, but that's, I believe that document is posted on our website under the Concord Facts Fire Station project. I thought the whole thing was about $1.2 million for architectural, engineering, construction management. That included design development and construction drawings. The original contract for 400, and I don't have the exact number, but I can certainly email you tomorrow with that breakdown sheet. That was for Station 1 and Station 2. When the levee failed and we had to go back to redesign and basically go back to the drawing board on Station 1, there were additional costs that were incurred. Trustees took that on February at the trustees meeting and passed that. But it's not the $700,000 we have now plus an additional 1.4, which takes us to $2 million. I think we're going to shake out probably about 1.2 to 1.4 is my is my projection. As far as the selection of the architect, we've had this question before. We went out to the whole United States and we asked for requests for qualifications, RFQs. We received 13 or 14? 13. We received 13 packages from architectural firms. We, the trustees formed a review committee. They went through all 13 packages, front to back. Each member of that committee did their homework. We narrowed it down to who we thought were the 3 finalists. The 3 finalists were then brought individually before the Board of Trustees, the fire chief, myself, in an all-day public meeting, and they were all interviewed. I want to say it was about a 2 to 2.5 hour session for each one of the 3 finalists. And after that was all done, the candidates went away and the trustees deliberated, and then they chose to award the contract to LeMay Erickson Wilcox. Incidentally, the architect is only half and no disrespect, we love our architects, but the other part of this is their partnered engineering firm, which is AECom, which is a local Northeast Ohio company, and coincidentally, the project manager for the fire station project lives in Concord. That's not why they were selected. I mean, we didn't even know who that was the case. But AECom is the local engineering firm that's partnered with LeMay Erickson Wilcox. And I want to say it's like a 55-45 contract. And so that's what we went with. One of the, I will tell you, I was in those meetings. One of the biggest factors was experience in building fire stations, not Beechwood, because we've heard that. Yes, they designed Beechwood. This is not Beechwood, but they have designed a ton of fire stations, and they were determined through the interview process and the vetting that took place to be the leader in firefighter safety with the red, yellow, green hot zone decontamination firefighter safety. And that was one of the big factors in selecting LeMay Erickson Wilcox, and then partnered with a local engineering firm that we knew was here in Northeast Ohio. I hope that puts some clarity on this.
I just wanted to make a quick comment.
Well, it does, but how did the other companies compare just in the general pricing out?
We didn't look at price when we selected the architect. we looked at qualifications. It was a request for qualifications process, not a request for proposal for bids. We looked at it from a qualification standpoint, not a money standpoint. That was the charge that was given.
And Mrs. Kangas, I just wanted to add, as a new board, we felt responsible that we needed to continue with what was already invested in the original investment that we already put forth, which is why we decided on going ahead with new plans.
Okay. It's good to hear that you have the project manager from Concord. That's a good point, for sure.
And I'd like to just close out and add one thought. We have seen a number of comparable stations thrown at. Chief had some information and I took a look at it. As we're starting to see this project, again, I think it's important to reiterate that we spent the additional $300,000 to go back to the drawing board. That's something we wouldn't have spent if the levy had passed and we were going forward. So that's the choice this board made. The money was spent by the prior board. The firm was selected by the prior board. But when you look at costs of other fire stations, and I guess just Ms. Kangas, because you brought it up with respect to comparables, there are, I did cost per square foot analysis on a number of projects in the area that have been brought to us, and those projects average out at about $333 a square foot. And right now at our estimate or conservative budget of the $8 million we're thinking about for one, and then subsequently Concord Township falls right in line with comparable costs. So in my diligence in looking at this, there are some that are more or less, but we're within a very reasonable business range when you look at things and say some projects are a little bit more, a little bit less. We're right in the meaty part of that. Fine. So we're not finding that this project is head and shoulders more expensive than any other fire department that's been built in the area.
Just one more question. From what I had been brought up was that there's and when you mentioned it and I mentioned it, an additional $1.4 million to develop construction documents and seeing through to the end of the project. And where does that figure come from? An extra $1.4 million?
I'm not sure where the extra $1.4 million comes from. On the fire station project in Concord Facts, it specifically outlines the costs from the architect's contract. I will be happy to extract those. I will email them to you separately. But I think you're, with all due respect, I think you're confusing the total cost and then you're adding the cost that we've obligated so far. And I think you're double dipping the charges.
Yeah, that would be good to see.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd appreciate it.
I will send that to you tomorrow.
Thank you, Mrs. Kangas. Is there anybody else on virtually that has a question?
Yeah, this is Brian Massey. I have a question.
Hi, Mr. Massey.
Hi, Mr. Massey.
Hello. I'm just wondering if there's any wisdom in putting the project on hold for a year. And the reason I ask that is with this COVID-19 pandemic, I am concerned about the local and state economies taking a real hit on their revenues. And it would be very disconcerting if we were to find that all of a sudden the governor says, well, I need to increase this tax to pull in this much revenue, or the county commissioners say, I have to increase the inside millage on the property taxes that you don't get to vote on because we need to offset the loss in revenues due to the COVID. So although we agree that the fire stations are needed, I'm just wondering if the timing is not right because of the uncertainty in the loss of revenues at the various governmental levels.
Okay, Mr. Massey, Carl Dondorfer. We have just had discussion on that collectively. It's something we considered. We're not sure what those revenue cuts are going to be. We do feel, though, very strongly that despite the current situation and pandemic that we are in, that it's important to move this project forward at this time based on where we are financially. And maybe it's something that was brought up here earlier at the first meeting that we start maybe with Station 2 and build that, because we have the cash, and move that forward and see how that goes. But we are considering that. I don't want you to think we just push that to the side or disregard it, but we did not. So I think, Amy, you have something to share?
Well, there's like an average inflation cost when you're putting projects on hold. I think it could be up to, 5% a year, Morgan? Yeah. So those are the, kind of things to think about. I mean, luckily with the Concord Township, we don't have an income tax, so we're not being hit there. But, looking at interest rates, it's a great question, but we want to make sure we're doing our best to take advantage if we can. But obviously, we're going to, make sure that it is the right thing to do based on the circumstances.
I think, it is all part, Mr. Massey, thank you for your comment. I think that is all part of our thought process as we dialogue about this. As I had mentioned in the last stakeholder meeting, Chief and Mr. Rose and Deputy Chief Jarrett and I went to visit a station that was very comparable in North Ridgeville. And their process was identical to ours, building or at least how we originally thought about the project, to build a command station and then a satellite station. They went out to do their satellite station and had found the cost going up 8%. So it's one of those things where, we look at the opportunity to wait for costs to rise, and or, what will the interest rates change by 0.5%, 0.75%, 1% within the next 12 months. Right now, we've explored some options and can find out that there's $300,000 to $400,000 worth of savings just based on the drop of the interest rate from the start of the year to now, looking at various financing packages. So you're looking at an opportunity to save $400,000 at current interest rates from where they were just 6 months ago.
Thank you. The idea of building the Fire Station 2 first, that seems to resonate with me, but that's just my opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Massey.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else on the computer or telephone?
Sure, this is Vanessa Pasek.
Hi, Vanessa, go ahead.
Hello. Thank you, everyone. It's been a great presentation. I just wanted to add a couple clarifying points and then a few questions. And so the first is, actually the town center is not a dead concept, and in fact, the JED board that Morgan is on, they just signed a contract with Next Site for $15,000 for 3 years, and they get a substantial bonus if they bring in a large multi-family apartment complex kind of a thing, up to $25,000 as a signing bonus. So the town center is definitely not dead, and JED is working on looking for developers to put that together. The second thing is that it is very true that when Concord looked for the fire station architects, they looked for, one of the requests was for designing fire stations, but the second most important thing was that that the architects win design awards. So that was a very important point that was in the RFQ. So I just wanted to mention that. And I think the third thing is that we should be very careful when we talk about the average inflation and things. We have no idea now with this pandemic what's going to happen, and whether inflation is going to go higher or lower, whether construction costs are going to continue, whether construction is going to slow down, because of the businesses. So we're really in uncharted territory with this pandemic, which is, terrible for everyone, for the country, and actually the world. So I guess I would just caution with that as well. The other thing that we talk about when we're talking about training, and it's really critical to have all of the training facilities at station number 1 so that firefighters can train at that station, and that's true. but you're going to have to bring firefighters from station number 2 to station number 1. And so there is going to be some training that's going to be off-site for the folks that are at number 2. And also, I think it's really important to remember that the majority of calls that the fire stations get are EMS calls, and probably only going to increase over time as Concord continues to age. But I did have 2 questions for you. When we looked last year, we had a 24,000 square foot building that was going to cost $9 million. We've now decreased that to an 18,000 square foot building, and it's going to cost $8 million. So I'm kind of confused that we would be able to reduce square footage that much, but not the price. And regarding an $8 million at $333 a square foot, that is much higher than the national average. So if you cherry pick a couple, of course you can find a cost per average that would be higher. But in general, when you look at fire stations around the area, it's not that much. So that was my first question. And my second question is, how many bedrooms will there be at each fire station?
I'll start with the $8 million question that you brought up. I don't know how much the new fire station is going to cost. That's the budget that I set. There's still unknowns with site development. There's still unknowns with finalizing the building to where we can get to a cost estimate. So I went with approximately $8 million to utilize as a planning figure. Where I think we end up, I'll bet you when it's all said and done, it's probably pretty close to $7 to $8 million to build that station with the basement and the site work going forward. As far as, I don't know how many bedrooms are in the, anybody?
Vanessa, I can assure you that we're not concerned about design awards. I mean, the goal here is to have a safe and healthy environment for our firefighters, and that does not resonate with anybody here on this board.
I think certifications are important, though. What certifications, as a architect firm in regarding fire stations, do you?
Sure. In brief, our credentials as fire and rescue design specialists, 125 stations over 30 years. We work directly with the likes. With my partners sits on NFPA, National Fire Protection Association boards. There's not specific certifications, if you will, assigned for fire and rescue design, other than our being licensed architects. Our greatest qualifications come from the depth of experience and the number of projects that we worked on, and bringing that knowledge and that focus to the specialties. Chief, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. Just to address the training comment, Vanessa, when you talked about Station 2 coming over to Station 1, we do that now. But we don't abandon stations. So we'll switch stations, and there will still be some smaller training elements built into Station 2 as well. But if there's a need for Station 2 personnel to come over and utilize the facilities at Station 1, then the crews switch. And so there's always coverage at both stations. To answer your question about the dorms, the proposed Station 2 design has 5 dorms, and the proposed Station 1 design has 6. Is that correct? I'm sorry? That includes the shift officer, yes. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that answer.
What was the number again?
5 and 6.
Station 2 has 5 dorms and Station 1 has 6, and that includes in both cases the shift officers.
Thank you.
Vanessa's Morgan McIntosh. I wanted to address some of the stuff with respect to JED and Town Center, since you led off with that. The decision to go with Nextsite, that is a marketing or they help attract and do economic development. That doesn't drive the development of that in any particular direction. So I don't think it's appropriate to say that, like I said earlier when I answered the other question, the direction that JED goes could be a lot of different directions. We're just looking at attracting business. So it has nothing to do with apartments. It has nothing to do with mixed use. It's just marketing for retail and other businesses. With respect to the choice that was made regarding Nextsite and the fee, the $15,000 fee is being paid by the JED. That is not coming out of Concord or Painesville's budgets. The plan that the JED board decided to go with was a bid award because their other billing structure was a fixed price that was many times higher than that. So the less expensive cost to the communities was to go ahead and give the award based on the size of, and it's a scaled project. The bigger the dollar that comes, the higher the award fee. And then depending on where it goes, because Painesville will have access to that for their economic development in their city, and Concord will be able to use that as an economic development tool for the JED. So that is, again, not a cost that's borne by Concord Township, and it was the more economical, didn't allow for a lot of outlay at the start and made us pay only if we get economic development out of the deal. I think that's it.
Okay. Audience, everybody's been real patient, so I'd like to bounce back and forth here. Denise?
Okay, thank you. I got it here earlier so that I could review the plans, and I think that the architects and the trustees have done, and the chiefs have done a really good job of reducing the footprint of the station designs. Obviously, Station 1 still needs to be teased out a little bit in detail, but I think that there's tremendous cost savings. I was a little surprised to hear that, you know, we're still at a figure of $8 million for Station 1, given the changes that were made. But as we said, we're still looking at different variables. Some of those that I discussed with the architect before was about the building materials and whether the pre-engineered might work especially for Station 2 because it's smaller and it could save some, you know, quite a bit of money. One of the questions I had was about TIF funds. I know that originally they could bring in like $200,000 a year. I know they're limited. I think we have another 8 years on them or something. But obviously it's general revenue coming into the township that offsets some costs. So you still have to think in terms of it's an additional $200,000 for 8 years, which hopefully in that amount of time we would have already built Station 2 if that's the direction we're going in, and pretty much done with Station 1. But, you know, I think that as hard as we have worked and the conversations we've had, and please trust me, whether you're ACT or a citizen in the community, I have spent countless hours talking to people at the township and have worked with ACT members, but the fact is that we have worked really hard to get to this point, and I think we're close, very close on design. But I do think that we need to work that hard to really whittle down cost and how we're going to proceed. Like, what is the timeline? You know, I like the idea of Station 2, building that, getting through this COVID thing, the economy. It's such a big question mark. Nobody has a crystal ball. No one thought this summer was going to look like this as far as the number of outbreak. So at this point, it just seems like a safer bet to go through the process, see what we learn from it before we tackle a big project like Station 1. But it doesn't mean we stop designing, stop doing what we need to do. And then people might feel a little more comfortable about looking at funding options. But that's kind of where I'm at. The other thing I wanted to say is that, I know that the figure's somewhere in the 90%, 90 to 95% range as far as build out in the township, which means that we're pretty much, built out except for some areas like that commercial development. And so when we talk about 10-year plan, we're not going to have an incredible amount of, more development because we're already there. And so we know that we talked about a third fire station, perhaps, if that area over there develops with the commercial, and we might be 10 years from that. We don't know what the timeline is. But at that point, we may be looking at a third station, more personnel, we don't know. But at this point, here we are. And if you didn't get a chance to look at the plans, I did. I'm pleased at what I'm seeing, but we need to work equally hard on getting that cost down. Thank you.
Well, for those that don't know what TIF is tax incremental financing. It's a funding option.
Folks that are on the computer, could you, if you're not actively speaking, could you mute your phone? I think some folks are experiencing some echoes. Thank you.
Okay. Did I hit everything? Did we hit everything that you touched on? We talked about, TIF. Tax incremental financing. I don't know.
I was working the phone issue. What was your...
She had a question about TIF dollars.
Which question?
It was 200,000 that we're getting, but I know that Amy Dawson has said it may be 8 more years of that might continue, but we can't use it to secure a loan, but it's still revenue in the township.
But you can't use TIF funds for fire state. It can only be used for infrastructure for the land supporting what you TIF'd. I can't apply that. We got a legal opinion from the law director on that.
Right.
I can't take TIF funds.
But it's still revenue in the township that isn't pulling away from other revenue that can be used for fire station.
Yeah, but I want to be careful because I don't want to end up with the state of Ohio in a lottery shell game with school funding where now that I have a lottery and I got $1 million, now I'm going to take back $1 million so that the schools are break even, because that wasn't fair what the state did to the schools many years ago. And that's a shell game that I don't think we should play.
Right.
And I don't think that's TIF monies for infrastructure financing, and it really doesn't free up general fund money to go someplace else.
Yeah.
Sir?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Michael McCullough, Pine Hill Road, 25-year resident, Concord. Thank you very much. Look forward to new fire stations being built. Got a question for the architect. Conceptual drawing, not really sure what the material, external, are we brick and mortar, or are we stone, what are we doing? And I'll keep this because I want to segue into another question.
No problem. Everybody hear me?
The folks, you have to stand over here.
I'll walk a little bit closer so people online can hear. So as we're kind of climbing in, we have initial concepts, and you'll see the one rendering that we showed earlier of Station 2 best shows where we're currently headed. As we revisit those, we'll be presenting these to the chief and the trustees for approval of materials. The current proposition is the lower level. You'll see some what looks like stone. So it's a stone-like product. We were talking earlier with Denise. It's an actual stack stone. It's not something that's adhered for durability. So that's used mostly in accents, so like up to a wainscot height, say 3-4 feet, with the primary kind of a siding, like a fiber cement siding. It's a very durable product, holds paint well, holds up through weather conditions. So specifically for the Station 2, knowing it is in a residential community, the intended aesthetic very much relates to that area and trying to be more residential. In the preliminary designs, the previous designs of Station 1, it followed the same aesthetic. We'd actually done a couple versions of that exterior. The current thought is that it would align, that the two would have similar palettes of materials. But as we have now moved to the new site, or potentially, if that's where the trustees would like to proceed, the new site, we would likely be revisiting that and looking and seeing if that palette does convey and continue, I think it could look very nice and work, but we would reevaluate it for that specific site.
Okay, so brick and mortar construction, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So back on June 12th, I took a Friday morning and I looked into steel buildings. A friend of mine had a steel building built in his backyard. Looked really, really nice. Toy box, you might have seen on TV. Steel construction, get a steel building. So I called the steel building people. Got to talk to them. They guarantee 25, 35 years for these, not the 50 or 60 that you're looking for, I guess, in your construction, the brick and mortar. So I asked for some pictures. I said, do you guys build fire stations? They go, yeah, we built quite a few. Okay, so I took a look at some pictures. Now, I don't know if you've considered or if you've built any steel building fire departments. So I looked at one, looked really great. Had a training tower. It was all brick and mortar training tower with a stairwell, so they could train on there, right? You gotta have a stairwell for training, running hose up and whatnot. But the rest of the building was all steel. 4 bays, a couple of bunk rooms, admin, bunch of other rooms. So I said, what's the cost of this? I talked to Assistant Chief. This is Ohio Township, Pennsylvania. He said this whole thing costs like $2 million. I said, wow, that's a great looking building. It's a lot of stuff. I think we would probably need a little bit more than that, but for a steel building, that looked wonderful. He goes, yeah, you know what's strange? He goes, there's a township south of us, and they're doing the brick and mortar, same square footage, $8 million. So this kind of opened my eyes a little bit. Made me think, materials, steel buildings. Not sure if any consideration went into that. As far as Auburn Career Center, the students build houses. I've seen the houses out on, what is it, Auburn Road? Auburn, a couple of houses out there. They look pretty good. Maybe these students can build the inside of these fire stations for us with their instructors, which I know are probably professional builders, and do a nice job doing it. And where would the revenue source for that come from? Would that be the tax dollars that are coming from that portion of the pie that's the school money that comes out of our taxes? Not the $400, but the other 50 or 75%? So let's think about some creative ways to finance and build these stations using materials that don't necessarily have to last 50 or 60 years. I saw an article recently, Los Angeles Fire Department purchased their first all-electric fire truck. First one in the United States to do it. Is this new fire station going to accommodate electric vehicles? What are we going to be putting out fires with in 20 years, 30 years? So do we really want to build something for diesel and gas fire trucks that's going to last 60 years when the world is changing? So those are kind of like questions. I'll get back to Mike instead of dropping it.
Thank you, sir. Just briefly to the construction types, and there's I guess for materials, we think structurally what's holding up the building, and then kind of aesthetically what the skin is that you see on the exterior. So I apologize if I misinterpreted your question. I was speaking mostly to the exterior, what you would see in terms of the aesthetics and look and color of the building. Structurally, as we move into the next step, we are going to evaluate pre-engineered metal. So I think the primary ways we would look for these buildings, Station 2 being smaller, might afford a more residential style construction. We might even look wood construction, probably steel stud, simple trusses for that by the size and scale. They're not very large spans. But we would be evaluating what the most cost-effective options are for any of these. Some of our other studios in the office, we do a lot of religious work as well. And back in early parts of my career when I did some work in that, I did a church that had a pre-engineered steel frame for a considerable portion of it, and it was very effective in that particular project with its shape, the forms we were using. And it is something we've done, something we're familiar with, and we will evaluate. And it really just gets to a project-specific assessment. And we'll be working with the AECOM team that's providing structural engineering. We will evaluate different types of structural systems from wood to steel frame, steel stud, load bearing, and consider pre-engineered as part of that study.
I'm just wondering, can you comment on longevity and, a building that's 25 years versus 50 years? Comments?
Sure, thank you. It's a great follow-up. So we do talk when we're talking about fire stations. If you plan and use durable materials, both internal, exterior for the primary structure, particularly the wear and tear the spaces go through, the bays in particular, but even the living quarters, everything about the station we want to be maximizing and providing long-term durability for your investment. I mean, you're spending millions of dollars on these projects, and we should be able, with good consideration and design, to provide you a product that is going to last 50 plus years. I'm not sure that some of the details you were describing, but the way we would likely use a pre-engineered frame, frankly, I think could be used very adequately and maintain our goals of that 50 plus year station. If you're talking about something that was truly a pre-engineered box, including the pre-engineered skins that you might see on a barn type facility, it's really that exterior skin and roof that is most susceptible and may not have the longevity. But if we're looking at using a pre-engineered steel frame on the interior that's fully enclosed and protected, that still brings efficiencies and cost, but then we skin it and protect it in a way that is going to maintain that long-term durability.
And then also, can you comment on, as far as the building and space, like he mentioned with the changing times, going to all electric. So is there flexibility in our designs to accommodate for that in the future?
That's a great question. It's a question that actually Katie and I presented on a couple of years ago, integrated technologies in fire stations. With a broad range from station alerting systems through components, but particularly knowing with the day and age we live in, technology, you mentioned specifically electric vehicles, technology is changing overnight. And our goal is to maximize the flexibility within the stations. Part of that includes what may appear at first as an oversized IT room, because we know those systems are changing and taking up more space, and there's different systems that will go in there that inevitably that space gets very well utilized. But for something like the vehicles, and we have talked to one of our we know they're coming. The ability to have electrical fire and rescue vehicles is coming. So making sure that the bays, we're not going to design those systems in full to account for them because they're not practical, and Concord doesn't have any right now and probably won't for the next 10 years. But making sure we are providing infrastructure. So there's a place, if you're ultimately going to get a charging panel, does the system reasonably allow for that, accommodate that change over time? And that's the type of planning we would want to be accounting for in that specific example, and anything similar.
Next question, anybody out in the audience? Comment, question, anybody?
Check.
Carl.
Check.
I'm Lawrence Husker. I just had simple ones for the architect too, because you talked about how you scaled everything down for this round 2, and all very much appreciated for the impact it have. But I always want to look at what's the consequences. What is the fire department losing from version 1 to version 2? And is that really acceptable? Or should we have stayed somewhat more with version 1?
Great question. We looked very closely with Chief and his team. We actually went through the building program line by line. And one of the comments I think that came up in the last stakeholder meeting was needs and wants. And really going through very carefully with Chief and not crossing that threshold of need and what's going to meet his operational requirements. We were talking about the number of bunks in each station. Chief, and I don't know if you have a further comment on it, but we did look carefully and ultimately took out a bunk from each of the stations, if I remember correctly, Katie. But it was a careful consideration at each of those steps, from the bunks We looked in in administrative spaces. That one staged largely as shame because it was basically already at that minimum. And we looked carefully through in the decontamination. I really appreciate that question on that because it's something that our firm strives on and takes very seriously. So we looked for efficiencies. In fact, we maintained the functionality. We talked to Chief, something Katie and I look at very carefully, and actually we'll be giving a presentation on later this year on the same topic, is getting into the details of that decon flow and each step that you'll take as you move through that cleaning process. And originally Station 1, we believe we had 3 showers at one point, and that we've reduced that through conversation with Chief as we really analyzed what that flow for his team as they're coming back from a call and going through. So it was a very analytical conversation, step by step, each of those spaces, with the goal of not crossing that threshold of what the operations need, but were there places where Chief felt that operationally he could manage to tighten things down a little bit, and those were the spaces we looked for and were successful in cutting them without negatively impacting operations. It did take, like by taking those bunks, for example, it did limit ultimately future growth of acquiring or adding. But as Chief has mentioned, I think the intent is that future growth we know ultimately will be addressed when Station 3 is needed in the future, and that station will address that. Did that answer your question adequately?
Thanks, Chris. Is there anybody online virtually that has a question or comment? Anybody online virtually would like to speak? Anyone in the audience? Mr. Terriaco?
Okay. Just a comment. You guys are very professional.
He's going to need a mic so the folks online can hear. I'm sorry.
They can't hear you. I'm sorry, sir. You just keep there. Have enough.
I just want to make a comment that the professionalism that you guys have demonstrated, I've worked at other boards in the past and some boards, okay, but you guys are very professional, very proactive. I think Concord is very appreciative of what you do. Thanks to the chief and his staff, I think you guys just do an excellent job. I was involved in building a fire station years ago. Didn't even come close to what I experienced here today.
Good job. Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't going to. Thanks. My name is Joe Liano. I've been a firefighter for 24 years, been a resident of Concord for 12. I've just been jotting down notes, and I didn't make the first meeting. Hearing some of the sacrifices the chiefs have had to make is pretty upsetting. It's upsetting that the first time around this didn't get passed. And of course, it's going to be a biased 2-minute quick conversation, but I'm a fireman. I know what these guys are going through. It's got to be upsetting for the Concord firemen to do their job and they get sworn in for this gentleman's comment to serve and protect. It's probably the best day of our lives when we get our badge. So even though they didn't pass, these guys are still going to give you the ultimate service, and you should know that. But it's sad it didn't pass them the first time. I think you're talking about, if I may, you heard $22 per 100,000. If you're for this, educate your neighbors. I went to the stations, I got signs, I put them in my neighborhood. If they had questions, I gave them as much info as I could. Because it's sad here, you think about the Concord guys now that didn't. I mean, if you've been to Station 2 on Prouty Road, it's, sorry chief, small, ridiculous, outdated. 2 bays, that's crazy. Real quick, I may have been on a roll and I think it's over now. Yeah, I can hit that real quick. It's also a shame you said you guys had to go down to build the apparatus for what you have now. I think with the growth, and I'm sure Chief Sable's going to say our call increase, your guys' call increase raises just like ours will be. So you look for the growth. I wish the apparatus space were bigger. Think about having that gator on a trailer ready to get pulled out in case there is a rope rescue. The massive accidents Concord gets here, they could be more prepared. To hear that they have to go in the service department to get an apparatus for someone who's probably against the clock is not good. Concord's a great fire department. I see Chief Sayo, I see Chief Terriaco in my fire department training. So the training does get done here. Guys that get hired full-time here don't go anywhere else, so it is a good department. They're well behind in what they have, and I know that just from, we'll be at new stations in 2000. They take pride in their stations, it's their home. They take pride in their crews, in their apparatus, and it's sad that we have to fight over safety and making these things smaller so it appeases the city or the township. I understand that. Again, this is gonna be biased because I'm a fireman. Hopefully those bays are too deep for engines. I didn't see, but hopefully we can get 2 engines in there. Hopefully Auburn's training center does pass eventually. I don't know why that's not happened. Everyone in Northeast Ohio goes over to Tri-C now to get trained. We are right in the middle of Lake County, Geauga. It would be great if that could pass. I don't know why. I know Concord has a lot of personnel that take care of that, and now they're over in Willoughby and we help them. But I hope that goes through. And lastly, and one more thing, put up for the bunks and the showers and less. I'm sorry, Chief, you had to do that. If any good chief, he's looking for the future, and it's sad that he's going to have to take a bunk out. I hope he wants to expand and make Concord what it can be. Call volume's going up. Hopefully this recession is over. We start getting better. He can bring in more full-time guys, and hopefully that sacrifice of one less shower, one less bunk doesn't hurt him in 15, 20 years when this Concord department is what I know it is. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your help, guys.
Thanks, sir.
Anybody else in the audience? Questions,
Anybody else?
comments?
I'm coming. I feel like Monty Hall working the crowd and let's make a deal.
Yeah.
I don't know, does everybody remember who that is?
Yes, I do.
Don't give it away.
Very good.
Yes, Robert Aspinwall, 7559 Sterling Drive, Concord. I have a question for the chief. Can you describe the decon area, how this can be mandatory from the state? Or is it is it a couple of years it's going to be mandatory for these guys?
I can't speak as to mandatory, but what I can say is that our firefighters have embraced even gross decon in the field, coming back to the station and cleaning up and before they go into the house side. It's a minimal effect on the overall because the station's not really separated the way it's supposed to be. But they've embraced the decontamination, not only after fires, but after traumas, after chemical events, spills on 90, diesel. So anything that has the potential to harm them, they take aggressive steps before they go into the house side of the station now. So as far as being mandatory, we do know that there are architects, specifically architects from LeMay Erickson, Paul Erickson, that's sitting on the National Fire Protection Association board to address hot zone design is being required in the future. So that's coming up in the NFPA.
Thank you. My question is for the architects. Concord has a seal, and that little seal has a little house. And I see the design back here. We need to, Concord is a rural area. When I come in here, when I moved out here, I saw that, the little house, I was seal, that's what Concord is. And I don't, it's not a bad design, but I want to see a rural kind of area. I want to see that kind of rural design. That's what Concord is. I think that a lot of people move down here for, the rural area. I hope we can, I know that's not the final design, but I hope we can try to mimic that. That little seal that we have in the little house. The last fire levy, do we know when the last fire levy was? When it was approved?
The safety levy or the fire operations levy?
What was it, like a couple of years ago, 3 years ago or something? I don't know.
Yeah, that was the,
fire safety. 12.
The safety levies.
The safety, there was 2 and 14.
In 2015 was the safety service levy. Yes.
That was a 5-year renewal. And then we
No,
also,
not the safety service levy is a
oh, not the
continuous.
safety, no, that's
The 2.7 mil
2.7,
fire
5 year.
5 years
is a
ago.
5-year levy.
The safety.
And that was renewed with
safety's
no
a concern.
increase in 16, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's, is that going to be renewed again in another 5 years, I take it?
Well, we have to make, oops, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Carl.
We have to make that decision by 2022.
Okay,
So likely 21 it'll be up for renewal.
okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else in the audience?
I'd like to answer Mr. Aspinwall real quick. I know you asked the chief about decontamination and state mandatory. As far as I'm concerned, it's mandatory.
Any other comments, questions? Virtually, I think nobody else is there, correct?
Well, there's folks on, but.
Okay, nobody has a question. Anybody else in the audience? Ma'am? That's the microphone. There you go.
Hi, I'm Heather, and I've lived in Concord for about 17 years now. And I want to thank Joe and all the other firefighters here for their service and everything they do to protect and help us. I know they all take that very seriously. And I want to also say I have had the opportunity to tour the stations. And I was in quite a shock when I saw the facilities that they live in. And they do live there. And for how many days a year are they living there? I mean, that's a lot of time to be living in these kind of facilities. And I think that we can't do this quick enough for our firefighters and for our community to keep them safe. So thank you to all our service members here.
Thanks, Heather. I agree. As a nurse, as a mother, if my son or husband, had to work in a situation where they're more prone to disease and bringing stuff home, I would be really concerned, and we are. So, you mentioned fear before. Like, I would be afraid if, I was in that situation and I didn't have the safety, the whatever is in place that could protect me.
Okay, Mr. Dondorfer had to step away, so I will just, one last final call for comments from the audience present. And one last call for comments virtually. Okay, I think with that, we're going to move on to, is there anything else from the township? Okay, so I'm going to move on to the closing remarks, and I believe that Deputy Chief Teriaka would like to lead us off this evening.
Thank you. I guess I'm the close-up act for the evening. Welcome, Pine Hill resident. I live on Pine Hill also. Thank you. Some of you know me, some of you don't. Ron Teriaka, Deputy Chief of Concord Fire Department. I'm sort of the old guy of the group. I've been here for several years. I want to take an opportunity to use two of the retired fire chiefs that are here. I was fortunate enough to work for 4 fire chiefs for Concord Fire Department. Chief Welk, Chief Teriaka, Chief Warner, and now Chief Sable. So I got 4 leadership styles racing around in my head. Chief Sable said earlier about the operations that he and I and the team worked on. Well, that all came from a foundation that started with Chief Welk, Chief Spear, a long time ago. If we look at what Chief Teriaka put together when he took over in 1985, reduced the ISO rating from 7.9 to an overall 5, started the paramedic delivery service with just a handful of paramedics to provide that service 24 hours, 7 days a week. A lot of that stuff and the operational work that he did was then handed off to Chief Warner. Chief Warner came in 96, took that baton and ran with it and reinforced the operations of what we did. He reinforced AMA that Chief Terriaco started with Leroy and Hamden to provide a tanker water shuttle service to the areas in Concord Township that had no hydrants, which improved the responses for fire protection. Chief Warner also put together the minimum staffing that we have now, minimum of 8, 4 and 4 at each station. Why did he do that? To enforce that we could handle 2 significant emergency incidents at one time. So he put that in place, which we have now, and also the addition of the 3rd squad. So that's pretty good stuff. So it just keeps snowballing. So what I'm trying to enforce here is it's all planning. Everything we do is a plan to make sure that we're there for you when you call 911. Because as you know, you've used the service and you know we show up, these guys take good care of you. They take great care of you. So I just want to enforce that we're always going to be there for you. There's redundancy built into our system to provide that fire and rescue service. Decon, I want to touch base real quick of decon. You asked about that. Some people say, well, the fires are down. Fires are down. But we deal with so much other stuff that we need those clean rooms, showers, or whatever you want to call it, decontamination areas. A few months ago, firefighters came back from a simple EMS run. They come upstairs, or the lieutenant comes upstairs and he goes, we have an issue. What's the issue? We got a bed bug contamination. What are we gonna do? We're gonna do what we could do best. So I got 3 EMTs, still 3 medics in the squad, 2 males and 1 female. What am I gonna do with them? They can't come off that squad contaminated. They can't go to the station contaminated. So we do what we do best. They adapt, overcome, and improvise. So they protected their privacy the best they could, got undressed in the squad, put on Tyvek suits, went into the lieutenant's dorm, which is downstairs closest to them, and then deconned themselves there, one at a time. So that's the reason. Yeah, it's just not for fires, it's for everything. It's for everything that we do. Physical fitness, just to touch base on that a little bit. We do hear that maybe we don't need exercise rooms. There is so much protection that comes out of that exercise room, the wall of weight equipment in it, treadmills and stuff like that that we've purchased that we already have. But when we talk about our firefighters being physically fit to come to your side to take care of you, whether it's an EMS run or a fire run, you want them in shape physically. That helps them. That helps them get through that busy day, not only physically but mentally. Huge increase in incidents with firefighters with behavioral health issues. So we want to do our best to protect those firefighters. So much comes out of that room. When we send astronauts to, this is sort of a weird comparison, but when we send astronauts to the moon, we got to send them with the right equipment. We got to send them physically fit and mentally fit. It's the same thing. When we send our firefighters out, we want them to be in good shape. So I'm going to end with this. And this is not a scare tactic or all or nothing. I'm a factual person. I don't get into numbers and stuff like that. I'm just a factual person. So could I have my firefighters just raise their hands? Concord firefighters. So the few of them that are here, I want you to put a face to those people that you say you support. And we support them tremendously. And I want to thank you for doing that. And they thank you for the support. When chiefs say when I go to bed each night, we hopefully have done everything we can to protect those firefighters. We wake up in the morning, same thing. On-duty shifts coming off duty, have we done everything to make sure they go home safely? And in the 2 days that they're home, we want them to be safe. So I just have this to pass on to you. For 2019, there's 48 firefighters who lost their lives in the line of duty. 130 firefighters died of cancer in 2019. 119 firefighters and 20 medics died of suicide in 2019. So we want to make sure, as the chief and the deputy chief, we do everything that we can for these guys that are sitting here and the ones that didn't make it tonight. Chief Terriaco did the same thing. Chief Walk did the same thing. Chief Warner did the same thing. They worried about that same stuff when they went to bed at night to make sure they've done everything they could for us. And that's what Chief Sable and I want to do, is to make sure we are building these fire stations to what they need to be. There isn't a lot of want in those. Those are necessity that we have. So I want to thank you, Denise. You've done a lot working with us. You've done a lot. Done a lot. Any questions for me? So thank you, Chief Terriaco. Thank you, Chief Warner, for doing what you've done to get us here. And thank you, Chief Sable.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Any other questions or comments from the audience here tonight? Anybody? Okay, I think we're going to make some closing remarks. I'm going to start off here. I guess, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for participating in the process. We have, personally, I've talked to people personally on the phone, met with individuals. It's been great to work with everybody. I've been in public safety 27 years, and I've always prided myself on making the best decisions possible. Grew up my entire life here in Concord, served Concord, and I guess I'm going to give my opinion here. These fire stations need to be built. I know we're going through unprecedented times. It's difficult with this pandemic and COVID, and I never thought we'd be going through something like this, but we are. But with that, we still have to provide for our community and make it a safe place to live, and plan for the future. And with that, I know there was a lot of questions raised about, the pandemic, should we put things off? And I struggle with that. I think about that. I mean, I've thought about it. It kept me up at night, but my opinion is we need to move on these stations. They're a priority. We need to move immediately on that. And I don't know, I'm throwing it out there. If you want to make a comment after I talk, please do. If not, you don't feel comfortable, you can call me, call another trustee. But I struggle with the fact that do we start with Station 2 and wait? Do we start with Station 2 and try to get financing for 1 now because it's going to be a lower interest rate and we won't endure rising construction costs? I know, Denise, you brought up a good point about the $8 million. It seems like a lot. Again, it's a budget estimate. I believe once we go to fixed competitive bidding, we're going to drill it down. But we're really thinking about what is the best decision right now for the township, and I want to throw it out there to see if there's anybody that has an opinion, and if not, you can certainly call me. But I just really feel strongly that this thing needs to get moving. It needs to get moving now. And, do we start with 2 and wait and put things off and see what happens? I know it's a lot of unknown out there. Or do we try to, reach out to the voters and see if they'll support it at a lesser amount and secure the financing and be able to get that financing at a lower interest rate and pay the debt off earlier and be done with it? Those are things that we are actually considering. We haven't made a decision, but we got to make a decision. So if there's anybody here that has an opinion, I would welcome that. If you're not comfortable, please reach out to me by phone. I'm easily accessible. I always return my calls, as is Morgan and Amy. But listen, we are going to do what is best for the township. We may not please everybody, but we have an obligation. and I don't take that lightly. So is there anybody that would like to respond? If not, I'll pass off the mic, and thank you very much for coming tonight and for your continued support and involvement in this initiative. Thank you.
Again, thank you, everybody. I appreciate everybody's comments, everybody's concerns. You know, I'm always very appreciate the amount of effort that our community residents put in to really try to understand the topics on behalf of everybody. So that's why we're here. You know, we're community. We want to do the best thing. We want to be fiscally responsible. We want our first responders to be safe. We want the community. So, you know, we haven't made any decisions. As Carl said, we're looking at all the options, and we're happy to answer any questions or take any more concerns regarding the issue. So again, thank you.
Well, once again, I want to thank everybody for coming here this evening. I think the dialogue's been constructive, and I appreciate hearing the diversity of opinions. We do have a big decision ahead of us as far as how we proceed with this, and I think I want to pull back to something Administrator Rose said, and we talk about the sequence of the stations, 2 first and this and that and everything. The bottom line with this project is it comes down to the financing. Okay, we discussed that. We've been very transparent about that over the last 2 sessions, and it seems to be the volatile issue with respect to everything. And we talk a lot about taxes, and I don't want to belabor the point of, you know, Concord gets a very small percentage of your taxes. I know people, you know, as far as raising taxes in Concord, I mean, let's be honest, Concord Township's not behind that. Okay, in the last decade, Concord Township has raised your taxes 2.3 mils, and a big chunk of that was to pay for Sheriff's Patrol because the county cut the Sheriff's Department budget. And when you think about some of the other levies that have passed, 1.5, 8.8, 2.5, 1.9, 4.9. I mean, so Concord has done its best job, and I always believed that, and then I ran for office and I became a trustee, and I spent time with the fiscal officer, and we've looked at it, and I know it's true. I mean, they're drilling it down. So they're being responsible about this. This project is in line with other facilities, and then when you take a look at this for, you know, square footage, we have to stop looking at price tags and realize what people are paying per square foot. We have to take a look at the process. The last board did diligence and hired LeMay Erickson. By our estimation, it was going to cost a lot more money to go out and research other architects. Why would we waste time doing that? Why would we spend more money? So we appropriated some more funds to take a look at this because the levy failed, and we wanted to do diligence. We created the stakeholder meetings to bring people here. I hope we've made the case that these projects, that there isn't waste in this. There isn't waste in here. I got to be honest with you, I'm disappointed that we're losing bedrooms and we're losing showers. I think that's the wrong decision. I own a business, I'm in manufacturing, I understand, I bought companies, I get financing, I get big numbers, okay? They're scary, all right? The first time I acquired a business is scary. But this is what it is. If we start cutting corners, we're gonna not make a facility. We need the facility in the size that it is. It's justified, we're gonna use all of it. And we're gonna build a facility that's gonna last. We don't wanna build facilities that 10 years later have walls falling off them or aren't designed properly or have wasted spaces. They're gonna use all of this, okay? I'm very convinced that this is an appropriate project. I know it's expensive, and I realize that, you know, that this is a challenging thing. We've seen taxes in Concord go up a lot, but this is a noble project, and the township needs this. So I guess that's about it. I just wanted to, again, thank everybody. Actually, I do want to share a thought that's come across my mind this evening. As we've had these meetings are successful, I'd like to ask my fellow trustees that we take some time to consider the idea, because we have a community that's engaged in this process and that's interested, and we have people that have been diligent about asking questions and come forward. I'd like for us to consider the idea. For those that don't know, the township appoints a financial advisory committee, and at present, we don't have anybody sitting on that committee. So I'm wondering if we wouldn't take this opportunity over the next couple of years to create a design and build committee that would work as an advisory group to the trustee board that could give us a recommendation. And the financial advisory committee is designed to sort of help the fiscal office be diligent about the money we spend. So maybe we could put a committee together that would help us advise the trustees, help us keep herd over this project, keep it on time, keep it on budget, and keep it reasonable. We could invite members of the community to go in. So maybe that's something we could take up during the meeting tomorrow night and talk about it. But and again, I'd like to speak for all of us. I think we'd all love to talk one-on-one with anybody that has questions. We're all available. We're all willing. So
Thank you again for everyone coming tonight and participating in the project process and project. We will be available after the meeting here to answer any questions that you have of any of us individually. And thank you very much. We appreciate it.